Hello and thank you for joining me today. My name is Leighton Pearson and you're watching Cozy Conversations. Today I have a special guest with me. His name is Matt Christiansen. Hey Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And it's awesome to have you. So I just wanted, I had so much planned for this and then stuff happened in the news and I'm like, man, I've got to talk about that and that and that. So I've kind of whittled it down to like three topics.
Okay.
So first, I'd like to talk about this abortion topic about New York and Virginia and how weird that's getting over there. And yeah, so I mean, I don't know too much about it. All I know is about 40 weeks and something about also after baby's birth.
Yeah. So when you say getting weird over there, are you in New Zealand? Is that where
Yeah,
you're? So, do you know what the legal standard is in New Zealand? Not to flip this, but I'd be curious to
yeah,
know
no,
just to compare.
absolutely. So here in New Zealand, you need, I believe, a couple of specialists to allow the abortion, and I think it's up to 18 weeks. They want to extend it to 25, I believe, but it's not 40 weeks, that's for sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, 40 weeks would even be pregnancy that's over term. You know what I mean? And she said up to 40 weeks. I don't know what she means by, like, I guess there's pregnancy over time or something. I don't know. That's what Kathy Tran said in Virginia. Okay, so it's 18 to 25 weeks, something like that. Are there exceptions after that,
I
or
don't.
is an abortion never available to a woman after that?
I don't believe it. I think maybe if the mother's like it's certain like death for the mother, but otherwise I don't think there is other
Hmm.
exceptions.
Yeah, so I mean that's generally the same standard that exists in the U.S. So here the Supreme Court has ruled that states cannot regulate abortion until the third trimester. They've ruled that a woman has a constitutional right to an abortion through Roe v. Wade until until basically into the third trimester, until fetal viability. Basically, the state can't regulate the issue. So you'll see that that line as the line of regulation in a lot of states. And what states like New York and Virginia are trying to do is roll back existing regulation on third trimester abortions. In New York, they've already done that. And Virginia is trying to follow suit. But what they're trying to do is expand the exceptions, in my judgment, to be so broad that basically anyone complaining about a headache or something like that could still get a third trimester abortion. Now, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but what these laws allow for is if the mother's health or even mental health is at all placed at risk in the
Hmm.
physician's judgment, not by any kind of legal standard, just in the judgment of the physician handling this case, then the abortion will be legal or can be legal. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, this is new. This is, if you've listened to me talk about this kind of stuff, abortion has always been a really difficult issue for me, and I've been mostly pro-choice my whole life with the understanding that this is a terrible decision that most women and families don't want to make. Circumstances may require it sometimes,
Mm.
and I'm sort of, I mean, I'm really changing my perspective on this whole issue as I watch what's going on, especially as it relates to these late-term pregnancies, because abortion, of course, is a very hot issue among people to debate. When does life begin and all that? But
Yeah.
I guess I thought we were more in agreement as a society that third trimester, basically fully developed babies at that point,
Right.
qualify as an individual human life that's worthy of protection, but that doesn't seem like the standard anymore. So, yeah, I mean, it's been wild to watch. I don't really understand the perspective, to be honest.
Right. I mean, I was the same as you a lot of my life. I was pro-choice, 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 and then I became a Christian, and obviously that flipped. But
Hmm.
but what I've noticed as well, when you actually look at it from like this marijuana one, is these issues become a gateway for other issues to be brought up, and also doing history, I've noticed that that's a tactic that totalitarian society or totalitarian leaders have taken as it's step by step by step, and
Yeah.
I think it can become really dangerous.
Well, you see this on a whole bunch of issues. You see this on guns, of course, in the U.S. They try to do these incremental changes, and they always act like it's going to be this tiny little change, but of course it's in pursuit to, much broader things like confiscations or outright bannings. You see this in all sorts of issues. I used to one of the big issues for me when I was younger that I really cared about a lot was gay marriage equality.
Right.
Because I had gay friends, and I always thought, well, this is dumb. Like, they should be able to have the same legal rights that I have. And I still believe in that to this day, but I remember thinking at the time that the people who opposed it with their slippery slope talk about, oh, this is going to lead to this and it's going to lead to that. At the time, I ridiculed those people because I didn't see why one would necessarily lead to the other. But as we've seen in that case, too, it's like, okay, now we have legal equality, and we have for X amount of years in the U.S., 4 years now, or however long it's been. But that's not the stopping point. There's not. That was the point for me as a progressive, where I kind of wipe my hands and say, okay, legal equality, now we can move on and do something else. But that's not the way a lot of believers of the progressive ideology operate. They have to find the next injustice, the next barrier to conquer. There always has to be an oppressor and oppressed, and they've always got to go after some form of oppression to conquer next, until they keep getting into weirder and weirder territory. And they keep trying to justify things that probably shouldn't be justified.
Right. And what I also find is when the left push for this kind of stuff, for more equality, for example, is that they find themselves actually getting a result of much less equality. And we see this in Sweden with the wage gap, and we see this here in New Zealand with, we see it kind of in New Zealand with the way that they talk about the treatment of the Māori today versus before. And we see that that their perspective of how we treat them now seems to even be worse than how we treated them before. And I just find that's an interesting tidbit with the left, is they kind of get more and more oppressed as less and less oppressed they get,
Well, and of course it's so results-oriented. Equality to them, almost universally, as far as I can tell, means equality of outcome as opposed to opportunity.
Right.
And so for people like me, and maybe you, if you share my perspective, legal equality matters to the extent that the state exercises authority over all of us. To that extent, I don't want the state unjustly exercising authority unfairly over someone because of race, gender, sexual orientation, those kind of things. But that doesn't mean that every single person is equal in every way. In fact, mostly every person is unique. Every person has their own individual talents, things they're great at, things they're terrible at, things in which they excel, things in which they are god awful. And I'm the same way, It's so, of course, in a free society where everyone is free to maximize the talents they have at their disposal and do the best with them that they can, you will not get equal outcome. That will never happen. The other aspect to this that's interesting is, like, to the extent we mostly have equality before the law in this country, with maybe some small nuanced examples where, maybe you have some unequal legal application in isolated places, but generally the law does not discriminate in this country, and even under those circumstances you still don't have equal outcomes. So what do? They're going after basically opinion now. It's not just enough to say, well, before the law you'll be equal, you won't have the law unfairly applied to you. Now it's everybody also has to have a positive opinion of me. That seems to be the standard that we're going with now. You will think I'm very cool in addition. And of course, the only way that you regulate equality before everyone else's opinions is to start regulating their opinions, to start regulating their speech. And if you can't do it by government force, you'll do it by trying to apply economic pressure. You'll go after their banks. You'll go after their financial support. And we see this all the time. It's like the use of the government hand has almost run its course, and they're trying to find other methods of coercion to browbeat people into their worldview. Right,
yeah. Well, and the thing is, with equality of outcome, I was watching, I can't remember what the channel was called, but it was a libertarian channel, and it explained it perfectly. With equality of outcome, you cannot have equality of opportunity, and with equality of opportunity, you cannot have equality of outcome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I can't remember what this called. Liberty. I can't remember. I think Stefan Molyneux might have had affiliations there, but anyway, what about the wall? Because that's a big, like, I think a lot of people here in New Zealand, when they hear the wall, it's kind of an icky subject. It's like, ooh, don't talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I saw a news piece about, the only thing I know about New Zealand is it's an island that's close to Australia, and you're called Kiwis, which I assume means maybe you have the kiwi birds there, or the fruit, or something like that. I don't know why you guys are called Kiwis, to be honest.
It's just a derogatory term because we have the kiwi bird and the kiwi fruit.
Okay, well, I like the kiwi fruit quite a lot. I think they're great. But I turned on the news like maybe a few months ago, and is it Prime Minister? Is that the term?
Yes.
Your Prime Minister was on American news because, one, she's a female Prime Minister, and two, she was pregnant. So this is like, I mean, this is intersectional heaven. She's a pregnant woman who's the leader of a country. Right. And she made a comment on there that really bugged me because she sort of virtue signaled. And I don't know anything about her. I don't know what her politics are. All I know is this interview. But she made a comment about how, well, in New Zealand, we don't build walls, kind of tossing shade at Donald Trump and us Americans and people who support the wall specifically. And I'm thinking, like, yeah, you also have an ocean.
Right.
You also have an ocean on all sides. So I don't necessarily, I mean, that's a pretty functional wall, I would say, of sorts.
Right. And we don't really have problems with illegal, like, we still have illegal immigration, but it's not to the extent as it is in America. Where,
yeah, I mean, I've heard the cases of people like rafting to Australia and maybe New Zealand and that kind of thing.
Right. I think more our problem is us wanting to bring in criminal refugees from Australia. That's our problem.
What does that mean, criminal refugees? Are they refugees because they're criminals, or they're refugees who just are criminals?
No, so Australia has this island where they send criminals, and it's populated by Kiwis, it's populated by Australians and that kind of stuff.
It's kind of interesting because Australia was originally an island for criminals, wasn't it? They just basically made a mini Australia.
Yeah,
absolutely. For their own criminals. All right.
But anyway, so Jacinda and the Labour Party here, they wanted to bring in these criminals because they'd been treated unfairly or something. Because they have an island and it's not sanitary as New Zealand prisons. Which, by the way, New Zealand prisons, we're allowed TVs in our New Zealand prisons in the actual cell. So, but yeah, that's what they were touting, is it's inhumane to treat these people like this.
I mean, to get back to your original question, are you asking like the status of the wall, or like my opinion of it, or what's kind of your angle?
Well, how do you believe, even if you believe there needs to be a wall or not, how do you believe that the immigration problem is solved, like the illegal immigration?
Well, I think first and foremost you got to secure the border, and I don't think that the wall is a comprehensive solution. That is to say, I don't think the wall will solve the problem by itself, but I also think it stands to reason that a physical barrier is part of a solution. I mean, we have a serious problem in this country of thousands. I don't know what the figure is per year, but we're talking at least thousands of people. And when I say that, I mean like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands or more coming across the southern border illegally each and every year. Now, and then of course it creates problems with assimilating that many immigrants, but it also undercuts the wages of the American worker if these people are willing to work under the table for wages far below what American workers will work for. We have security concerns where we've had, people debate the rate of crime of illegal immigrants. You can have that debate. To me, it's irrelevant because these people don't have a right to be here. So even one case like Kate Steinle in San Francisco getting murdered, or Molly Tibbetts in Iowa getting murdered, those are two cases too many. I don't care what the rate is, because those people don't have a right to be here. Therefore, they don't have the freedoms that we afford our citizens that create circumstances for murder in the first place. So there's all kinds of problems associated with it. We have to get a handle on it. So my view on immigration is we've got to stop the flow first and worry about who's here illegally second. I think that's the other big piece of the debate is if you can slow down the flow of people, or ideally stop the flow of people, what do you do about the potentially up to 30 million people who are here in this country illegally right now? Do you
Right.
offer a path to citizenship? Do you deport? What do you do? To me, there's room for debate there. I can see, like, as a philosophical matter, I can see why people would say you must deport, they have no right to be here. As a practical matter, I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to round up tens of millions of people and deport them without instances of violence. How do you do this reliably? What's the cost of doing this kind of thing? So anyway, like, I think the wall is part of this solution, because you gotta slow down the flow of people first.
Right.
And if you don't, we're gonna continue to have serious problems in this country associated with legal immigration.
You said about the figures and it doesn't matter. I think, like, I'm with you. It doesn't, like, if there's one murder that's evidence enough that illegals need to go, but I think these figures matter because it shocks to the left. And when I say left, I don't necessarily even mean a liberal. I mean, like, the fringe of the left side of the spectrum. It shocks them, and then they start to move more and more to the right. Not necessarily on the right, but more and more towards it. And I was researching, and I used the 20 million figure for my research, and found that 5.7% of the population, amended for how many people are illegally here who aren't in the census. So 5.7% of the population are illegal immigrants, and
in the U.S. or in specific states?
In the U.S. alone.
Wow, if that's true, well, I guess that's not that crazy, because the high estimate I've seen, I guess that's right in line with some of the higher estimates I've seen, actually. So that's possible.
Right. But the murder rate, because you can get the murder rate over I done 2017, 2016, and I averaged them because I couldn't find the actual murder rate for 2018, and so I averaged them about 18,000, and so I found out that 22% of the murder rate are illegal immigrants as well.
22% of the overall U.S. murder rate?
22%.
I got to see that. If that's, I mean, I'm not doubting it. I gotta. That would be insanely high if that's true.
Right. I absolutely agree with you there, and I was like, wait, how are people not see, like, Donald Trump? I think should obviously get the proper research. This was me just sitting at one night just researching the numbers and percentaging them. And
do you remember what sources you used? What data sets?
Sure. I used the 20 million that had been touted, and now it's like 22 million. Some say 30 million, but I thought 20 million was nice enough anyway, because even the left says 11 million, and they stick with the 11 million. So I say 20 million to be nice to them, and also the figures I used for the murder, I used the 2016 murder rate and the 2017 murder rate and averaged them overall, which came around 17,400, but I added, like, I just rounded it to 18,000, so it's actually probably a little bit more when you do the literal percentages.
Yeah, I'd have to take a look at it. This is news to me.
Right. And also the serious crime rate, that's including murder, sexual crimes, and assault of any kind. That's about 20%.
Yeah, this is. I see so much conflicting information, and I haven't taken a close look myself, so I don't really know who to believe. Like, on the one side, I hear these citations all the time. Well, they actually commit less crime than the population overall. Which to me is nonsense, because by virtue of illegally crossing the border, 100% of illegal immigrants are criminals.
Right.
And then if you mean crimes after crossing the border, fair enough. But I guess I haven't done the deep dive because I'm unwilling to grant their point.
Right.
You know, it's like I said earlier. I don't care if they're saints as soon as they cross over. The point is, we have sovereignty. we reserve the right to vet who's coming in and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And even if they're coming in and doing a great job contributing to the American economy and all that, that's fine. It's not fine. What I mean is, they need to be checked. I guess I'm glad that they may or may not be committing crime in that scenario, but the point is, you don't have the right to just come in,
right? Well,
without following the legal process and without getting the permission to do so.
Well, isn't basically the curriculum to get into America is basically find a job and have a place to live?
Yeah, generally speaking.
It's not that difficult.
And the bar is even lower depending on where you're from. Of course, we still have the diversity visa lottery where we nonsensically just hand out visas to countries that are underrepresented in merit-based evaluations of other immigrants. So it's literally just a program that says, based on merit evaluation, these countries are underrepresented. Let's just throw a few visas over there for diversity. Even though the reason those countries are underrepresented is because they're not providing immigrants that display merit, that are able to compete with the rest of them.
Well, that's another thing is, like, how do you do immigration? Because I think the way that we've done immigration when I say we, I mean the West, has done immigration for a very long time, is kind of, I will say it's not a very good system, because we get these people from the West, and then we say, well, we virtue signal and say that's not good enough, we need to go to Africa and we need to go to...
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I think that maybe signing contracts with the country where you actually get a benefit from that country. Let's say you go, okay, we'll bring in 10,000 immigrants from your country, or not even cap it, but just say that's as many as we will bring in, and then get, say, $20 million from that country for that contract.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's something there, but to your point, there's a lot of legal immigration in the United States too, that I think the jury's still out on whether or not that is beneficial to this country. Now, I'm of the opinion that there are a lot of people across the globe who are talented, who are highly skilled, who would make this country a better place if they came here, and I would like an immigration policy that seeks those people out, identifies them, vets them, and allows them to come in and build business and wealth here. And we don't have an immigration system right now that does exclusively that. We have the kind of system where that I was talking about earlier, where for some reason we decide that people with very little to offer should be given some sort of weird preference to come in as well. And to the point that you're making, I don't know necessarily what benefit that provides the United States. I'd like to see some data on that. When you what is the contribution of each year's round of diversity visa waivers? What sort of economic impact is that making for the United States? What sort of tangible benefit is that providing? And if the answer is none or very little, then I would be in favor of eliminating that program altogether. But if you're going to keep it, to your point, maybe the answer is you at least get some sort of payment or some benefit for providing the opportunity to these people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got like 5 minutes left, so I just want to jump to guns right now.
Sure.
Because I've seen that places like so the what was it, I can't remember what it's called, where you have your gun and kind of they say it turns it into a machine gun, but it doesn't really.
The bump stocks?
Bump stocks, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was watching that, and as they start putting on more regulation, because we're highly we're not regulated to what we can use or anything, but to get a gun is extremely difficult here, a gun license. So, I mean, we can have we're allowed.
When you say extremely difficult, what makes it so tough?
Well, if they have any kind of idea that you want to use it for defense at all, they will not give you a license.
So it's like hunting only or something?
Hunting only.
Or that's so strange, because it's like, here in the U.S., the Second Amendment is all about defense. Hunting,
right.
I get a kick when people say, well, that gun's not for hunting. First off, almost any gun is for hunting, circumstances or situation or game depending. But second off, hunting is not the philosophical basis for the Second Amendment. So I
Right.
don't care. Like, I'm not a hunter. That said, I'm not anti-hunting either, but I just don't hunt. And I am very much, I mean, there are a lot of firearms in my house, and I'm very much a pro-Second Amendment guy. It has nothing to do with hunting, you know? So it's weird to hear that that would be the justification from the state's perspective.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of scary as well, because it's like, well, I mean, I'm not saying that Labour would do it, but I mean, let's look at from like a right-wing perspective. What if someone on the right wing comes up and that's totalitarian, just to give the left a little bit of leeway?
Yeah, or Donald Trump.
Yeah, what if
right
Donald
now.
Trump?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like they want police to have guns in America, but not the people. I'm like,
Right. Well, police are racist, but only they should have guns. Trump is Hitler, so give him all your guns. It doesn't make any sense.
right. And so I'm with America in this one. I'm like, bringing the First and Second Amendment over here. I'll take that gladly and apply it to our law. But yeah, it's to do hunting only, and if you use force that is over the capacity of the person attacking you, you can also be done with manslaughter.
So if someone like is punching you or something, like kicking your ass,
Yeah.
and you were to shoot that person, then you would be criminally liable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like here in the U.S., it varies by state, but in my state, the standard is serious bodily injury. So a felony assault in the state of Montana is serious bodily injury, and there's a more specific definition to that in terms of like the damage that's actually done to you. But generally speaking, like kicking someone's ass with your fists is serious bodily injury. So if you have reason to believe that a person is going to commit serious bodily injury against you, and of course they have to be in your immediate proximity, they have to be moving toward you. This has to be something that's happening to you. It can't just be a guy across the street saying, I hate you, I'm going to beat you up. It's got to be more immediate than that. But generally speaking, if someone is committing felony assault against you or about to commit felony assault against you, you can use deadly force.
Right.
And to me, that seems like a pretty reasonable standard. Why do I have to wait until someone's attacking me? For all I know, he has a knife. For all I know, he has a gun. For all I don't know what he has. So why would I wait for him to start beating me up before I defend myself? That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
No. Yeah, and like being in that kind of environment, I've now actually gone really extreme with this idea of guns, and I'm just like, I don't even want criminals to not be allowed guns. Like, just let everyone have guns, because the marketplace will say, they're not going to shoot people.
Well, it's interesting. Generally speaking, I don't have a problem in the U.S. of restricting specifically violent criminals from getting firearms. The Constitution and our founding documents say generally that you will not be deprived life, liberty, and property without due process of law.
Right.
So if you've been convicted of a serious violent crime, yes, you are being deprived liberty and property, but it is through due process of law. So I have less of a problem with that. But I do think about this, like you can't own a gun, not just like, I mean, you can't possess a gun, period, in this country if you're a felon of any kind. But that could be like financial crime. You might have, like if I don't know, if you did some Bernie Madoff stuff or whatever, like if you defrauded some people with investments. That's not to say that those things are cool. They're not. Those should be crimes. That said, do I think that like even Bernie Madoff, who again is a guy who sucks and defrauded a lot of people, I'm not convinced that he should be barred from having a gun to defend himself, though.
Right.
I don't have reason to believe that he's more of a risk to the public if he's armed than anybody else.
Right.
Again, this excludes people who have committed assaults, rapes, murders, all that stuff. I agree. They shouldn't be. They've forfeited their right to be armed at that point, in my assessment. But for stuff that's nonviolent, like why should a nonviolent crime prevent you from being able to defend yourself? I'm not convinced on that. To your point.
Well, and the reason I feel that way, that strongly about crime, is especially now when it's quite likely that speech could start becoming criminally enforceable. Like if.
Yeah. Well, and that's the angle I go with in defending the Second a lot. Now, I'll defend the Second on its own merits, but every once in a while you're talking to a person who just, I don't even want to say has an irrational fear of guns, because honestly, I used to be more of that perspective. I was just more reluctant, hesitant about guns because I didn't understand them, and I didn't understand the law that exists around them. So if I ever have to try to persuade somebody who is a little more fearful of guns generally, I think that's an effective angle to go with, is like, listen, as long as this is part of the Constitution, if you accept chipping away at this, little by little, if you accept all these restrictions and rules and stuff about what's supposed to be your God-given right, there is nothing to stop your right to speech from being basically afforded to you based on the state's permission slip, or your right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure being chipped away at, regulated, a privilege reserved for the few as opposed to a right. Go up and down the Bill of Rights and say, if you're comfortable with chipping away at the Second, you are creating a precedent for chipping away at the rest of these. And that's why I have respect for the people who are anti-gun, who just come out and say, listen, we want to repeal the Second. At least, I disagree with them wholeheartedly, but at least they're consistent. The people that drive me the most nuts are like, listen, I'm pro-Second Amendment, but here's how I'm gonna whittle away at everything that it means.
Right.
And here's how I'm going to give it the toilet paper treatment legislatively. Those people drive me nuts.
Well, I think that's a great place to end. I would love to have you back another time, maybe.
Sure.
This has been great. Thank you for joining me. And
of course. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. Have a great day.
You as well.
Bye. I don't have an iota of brainstem that knows how to do this in-card stuff, but I do have an important announcement. Firstly, Cozy Conversations is taking a little 3 to 4 week break as I have a few things to do before the next interview, but suffice it to say that Cozy Conversations, the production, the time that I will use to produce this show, it'll be for the benefit of this show, for this channel. And one other announcement is that I want to hire a general manager to this channel, as I have another project that I'm trying to get off the ground, and so I don't want to spoil the surprise, but all I will say with this is the in-game is huge, and this is going to be a big undertaking that will probably not see a culmination until halfway through the next decade. By the end of next year, though, we'll see major strides on this channel and beyond. So I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. Help me and this channel out by beating that subscribe button into an inch of its life. Remember that if you want to receive those notifications when I upload the next conversation, the first logos, or another story, chime that bell. Like this video for it to get out, and share this video with your friends and family. I'll see you next time, but until then, stay safe. And as always, Amen.